Okay, all right. We're gonna record the recording. I'll cut this part off, but ready to go. Welcome everybody to the Fully Remote Talk Show. We are on episode 30 today, and we're going to talk about the state of virtual event platforms in 2022. I mean, 2.5 years back, before COVID hit, anybody thinking about events were like largely thinking about like the giant infrastructure and like the in-person, the food and like the venue. That's kind of what events was about. We did a big topsy turn in when COVID hit in March 2022, March 2020, when like everything went virtual and people who were in the event industry all adapted. They were really smart with the event space. They knew how to get it to the events, into the virtual event space, and they all adapted, and virtual events became a thing. But now a dime a dozen virtual event platforms came forward, and they all have different capabilities and they're all available right now. Things have also started going a little bit in person. So, what is going on? What is the state of these virtual events and the event platforms in 2022? And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And who better to talk about this than Merijn? Uh, Merijn is the founder of Event Mender. He is helping other companies decide on which platforms they should be using and like help them launch and run really good and profitable events. Merijn, we're super excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Arjun. First of all, congratulations on the 30 episodes. I think that's a huge milestone. So, good job for you being out there, helping others that struggle with hybrid or at least kind of the online way of working that we all kind of got faced to in the past 2 years. Looking very much forward to this episode. So, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. This is great, Merijn. I'm gonna jump in straight into like a very broad general question over here, right? Uh, what is the business case for events? I know that like there are like some people who are in our audience who have not thought about event marketing as a thing. So tell me about from the perspective of people who run events right now. Why are they running events? What is the business case for it?
There are quite a few business cases for it, but for me, or what the events that I'm involved in the most, and you have to think about conferences. Some people, when you talk about events, they're obviously right away thinking about a nice festival, music, getting together. I'm more on the business to business side, and there you have a lot of conferences, summits where you exchange business knowledge, insights in an industry, and that doesn't only give you the possibility to add value to your audience, but also provides you with that thought leadership status. Like you are the person talking for so many other people. It gives you a certain status. So that is obviously one. On the other hand, it is the perfect way to bring together like minded people within one certain industry. And that means you can do business, get to meet the right people in your industry, like minded people, all working on the same problems, the same issues that they see and they want to solve. And maybe you find your next partner there. Maybe you find someone who can help you, or you can help someone else. And in that case, it's the biggest business case is the actual business that comes out of events, networking, expanding your network, being able to maybe even sell a product, but mainly establish a face to face, whether it's virtual face to face or in person face to face connection with new people that walk past your stand or digitally walk past your stand, that actually see your brand, and maybe they get a little chat with you and get to know you as a person, which gives you a bit more of a, not a just a brand. They see the people behind the brand, which is very good for your business. Building relationships, it's not just the brand image, it's also the people behind the brand that they actually do business with, because that's something a lot of people also mentioned lately. Business to business is not just companies talking to companies. Within those companies, you still have people talking to other people from those companies. You have the same goal, but you're still talking with humans. And in that sense, you have to really make sure you can connect humans with other humans in order to make the business go faster. I think those things are the main business cases for event. There's a lot of also marketing related, as I mentioned, thought leadership. But in that sense, those two are really the main focus for business case of events.
Great points. For somebody who is attending or exhibiting an event, their ability to network, connect, and form relationships that are more than just like your brand, but like the face behind the brand and like the people behind the brand. And that's actually really good. And for somebody who is organizing this event, it actually is also about like the thought leadership, the ability to bring all these people, being the person who is the driver of this industry. And that's a big, big plus as well. Very, very valid points. I think like these are like pretty solid business cases for anybody to be both participating in events as well as like running their own events, running their own conferences as well. um, I want to ask about like this all seems perfect for like these big companies, right? Like I think like these massive organizations are the ones who like do these conferences because these are in general like expensive, runs sometimes in the order of like million. Like think about Dreamforce, it's probably like tens of millions of dollars being spent on it every year. Like that's like kind of a big event that only Salesforce can run some of these things. But one thing this virtual events has kind of opened up is that like even smaller companies can start to tap into an event strategy. Tell me a little bit more about that as what you're seeing. Is this happening? Have more smaller companies looking into events and running their own events?
It's funny that you mention it because I actually saw a report, I think 2 months ago or something, where they actually zoomed into the industry, and obviously the big ones are the ones that everyone knows. So, like for instance, a Dreamforce, it's something that a lot of people have heard before, and because those names come up a lot, you would assume that it's only big companies doing events. But actually, if you look at the data, 80 to 90% of all the events are events for less than 150 people, like relatively small niche events, but they don't get the cloud as a Dreamcast does. And that means that for the average person who's not really deep into events, you would think like only the big companies do it. It is actually true what you're saying, that because virtual kind of lowers the boundary, you don't have to per se have a whole catering, a whole venue, and all those different aspects of organizing event that normally come to a plate of a professional event designer. You can kind of merge that into one experience, which is the online experience. It still needs a lot of attention.
Of
I
course.
still highly recommend working with event professionals that actually know how to make the most out of whatever environment you're using. But that means that the costs are in general a lot lower. And that means that the entry point for even the smaller businesses, they can now actually host the event instead of maybe getting a stand on the event or just being participant. They can actually organize it, and that gives them a very unique position, especially if you do it for a smaller group of people. You can make it very intimate, but that means that you're the one who organized that, so you kind of facilitated everything that came out of it. And whether it's business, whether it's knowledge, whether it's just connections, that brings a lot of value, and people then associate your brand with the value you brought to them at that event. So it's definitely a good strategy to go on. And in that sense, yes, it has definitely lowered the boundaries. It's now even going to be more smaller events.
I like that. I mean, 80 to 90% is a staggering statistic. Like
Yeah.
that is just not what I expected. And I love the point that you made about like how when you run your own event, it actually has your brand behind it and like your style, your way of running it. So event strategy for people used to be attending conferences and like going and putting a booth there at best, or connecting. But now it could be in that like you get to design and you get to do it. And I completely agree with your point that like just because it's easy to do doesn't mean that like everybody can do it. An event professional or like what an event organizer brings to the table is a lot, and they can help in taking this from being a boring non-attending event to like what could be like a successful way for you to generate leads or like make this a great business outcome for you. um, Great point there, Ryan, about that. I'm gonna jump in and ask about like just on this topic like more is who in the organization is like caring about this, right? Like because it used to be the thing where like there was a dedicated event marketing team or so, but when it comes to virtual event, have things changed? Like, are there different people who are now thinking that like, okay, I'm just gonna like take care of this, and especially for smaller companies there's no like event marketer for smaller companies. So what is kind of the thinking there?
I think it kind of got more generalized, as in what you see a lot, and also another study I read before is that webinars are have been quite a big thing for
Yeah,
marketing as a good tool to use for before the pandemic, quite quite already a long time. And what you see right now is that a lot of people kind of see virtual events as a webinar on steroids. So they can do
right,
their webinar, which is highly effective in terms of getting people in, getting to know your brand, telling your story. But then they can add an extra kind of layer to it where they can have people actually network with each other, do a little bit more in terms of that experience. So it doesn't just look like a quote unquote normal webinar that people kind of expect how it goes. It really wows people, which also gives them an actual memory of that event, not just one of the billion webinars they come across every day, but something that really stood out to them, whether it's the customization of the platform, the experience they actually brought, or just the fact that it's more than just a Zoom meeting, more than just
right.
a one-on-one or one person pitching. They can really enhance the experience for their attendees, and that means that yeah, it's at next level. With that said, for smaller companies specifically, it will be mainly the marketing department that sees a potential in this.
Yeah.
um, it's not very common to see like a sales department saying we have to do events, we have to do
Right.
events. It's mainly marketing, and then sales kind of comes into the play as well, especially more after the event when you actually follow up and take them further to your funnel.
It's a great point. I think the point that you mentioned about like how events are moving away from what is like a either a Zoom like or what can eventually be seen as like a video or so later, but like there people are like innovating to say like, hey, how can I give value for people who are attending the event in person and like making the network and everything. Great points over there. Let's jump on to like this question that's on top of everybody's mind is virtual events obviously is what we've been talking about and I would love to continue talking about virtual events, but how are things moving like now people are going back, a hybrid is a thing like this time Dreamforce is happening right now in San Francisco, I think it was last week. So what is the state of this and what are your bets about like how things are going to move in the future?
um, how do you say, like, hybrid is definitely not the most favorite word for event professionals, mainly because a lot also struggled with figuring out how to execute hybrid events. But to answer your question right away, it's going to be some form of hybrid. Hybrid is a very broad term. It can pretty
Right.
much be like us right now having a recording where I'm in person in my studio, you're in person in your studio, we record it, and then an online audience is joining in. So it doesn't always have to be synchronous. It can
Mhm.
be mainly asynchronous, so not at the same time. But from my perspective, it should be a little bit more than just planting a camera in the back of the room and recording whatever is going on. You really have to entertain and engage the online audience as well. With that said, if you look at what's going on right now, a lot or a few event professionals actually refer to it as the pendulum of events. It kind of swings from, obviously during the pandemic, it was fully virtual. There was nothing else you could do. And then now what you see is the same with also vacations. For instance, people are on revenge holiday taking. They are on revenge in person because they missed that connection so long for the past 2 years that they're like, oh, I have to attend every event and have to be in person, and everything has to be in person. And especially the event organizers that weren't really able to take the most out of virtual events, or that felt like they didn't have even an option to do virtual, they are now like, and in person is back and everything is going to be in person and we can't wait and everyone should be here. um, I totally understand that, and I actually also have a few in-person events on my agenda, so I'm looking very much forward to them. But what you see is, in general, the attendance is about 65% of what it used to be. So there
Mm,
is quite a chunk of your attendees are missing, which makes it difficult because you kind of were expecting the 100%, but you only get 65%, which means also expectations of your exhibitors, for instance, that expected more people at the event. They're not always the most satisfied. And a lot of people, after having 2 or 3 events as revenge events, finally getting back to in person, they're like, yeah, but it does cost me a lot of time. It does cost me, I have to probably fly there or at least drive to that event if it's very near me. But most of the time, it's not really central for everyone. That's also impossible to do. So people have to travel. You have to book an hotel. You have to stay there a few days in a row. And actually, during that event, you're not really able to do a lot for work, especially when it's a very busy, fully packed with a lot of value event. It's going to be hard to do your jobs here and there, which in a virtual event, yeah, I don't have to travel anywhere. I don't lose time in terms of that. I can just join into the event. And even if it's like an event that I don't have to fully participate in here and there, I sometimes also still do some of my emails, for instance, when I'm just listening, like almost as if it's a podcast, like you hear a
right.
person sharing their experience, and at the same time you're doing your chores in the house. You can still be with your family. A lot of people are like, okay, for me 1 or 2 events are very important, everyone is going to be there, and the 8 events I used to do in 2019 and before, if I can not do them but do them virtually, I
Right.
would have so much more time. I can still gather the knowledge, still expand my network, be on those most important events, but the rest, it's fine. And then from the event organizer perspective, you see that obviously now you have 65% of your attendees, so you are having less exposure to your event, less people that actually you can sell tickets to, for instance. There are always going to be a lot of people that maybe they broke their leg, maybe they're a
Mm,
little bit too introvert and they don't like to be amongst 10,000 people or even more on a bigger event. um, Maybe for whatever reason they are not able to travel to your event, but they're still interested in the content. They would love to join in person of virtually, whilst you still have your in-person event, but they can then also participate, be part of the event without having to, you know, they have some limitations, so they can literally not go. So they're still included. You really give them a chance to join your event, which is very important. Um, and in that regards, like, it's going to be essential to include as many people as possible, not just for your reach, but also in general. Like, no one wants to feel left out. And in the past, mainly a lot of people had to be left out. Maybe the tickets were sold out. How can
right.
you then still make sure that people can actually attend, be part of the event? Maybe not in person, but at least join online. And that's for business to business conferences, summits, but even for festivals, it's the case.
Right.
Saw an interview where someone mentioned, like, I saw Flume live and I never had seen Flume playing live, but then he was like, it was a live stream from Coachella, if I recall it correct. And he was like, and now I could just be part of that experience from my couch. And that is kind of how it feels for someone who sees a speaker that they really wanted to see, but they can,
Right.
for whatever reason, they cannot be there. They have an appointment, they have restrictions. We all have restrictions, and now everyone can join. And then on top of that, us as an industry, we are responsible. Vanessa Lovat, she shared this on LinkedIn, that she found a research where the event industry as a whole is responsible for 10% of the global emission. So in
Oh,
terms of
my
the
God.
CO2 footprint that we all attribute to,
Wow.
if we ever want to bring that number down, because it's huge, 10% of the whole world is from the event industry. um, if we want to bring that number down, and we have to, because a lot of countries have kind of dedicated, we're going to zero emissions, we have to bring it down. We have to find ways to do it, and virtual, it's not going to be 100% CO2 neutral. Obviously you're still using electricity, but it saves an awful lot. You don't have to travel. You're not wasting all these things that you have to set up and then one-time use kind of stands, etc. Like, it's a big thing for event industry in general to be as sustainable as possible. We have known it for a few years now, and at this point we really have to pivot. And we got a tool kind of by accident, by the pandemic. It was forced upon the event industry, and we would be crazy if we not make sure that we use it to the fullest potential, because there are a lot of event professionals actually pulling this off, both fully virtual as hybrid events. And all of them are like, I'm never going back to only in person. Like, maybe a
Right.
super exclusive meeting with like 10 super CEOs of this one particular industry, that should be in person. You're not going to invite virtual attendees to those kind of meetings. But pretty much everything else, why not? You can still add additional audience, you can still grow your event, but be in a sustainable way, all inclusive. Everyone is included in your event, everyone is welcome. And in that sense, that's just limitation of in person. And in person, it's
Yeah.
great to meet each other in person. There are a lot of people that argue, I can't network online. I'm not sure how about you, Arjun, but I think we kind of networked online.
Yeah.
We're meeting each other online. I love it. I have a feeling I already have a connection. And the moment that we actually go to that one or two big events that the whole industry comes together and we see each other in person, then we can deepen that relation even further. But you already established that first relationship virtually. At least for me, I love it. I've expanded. I've probably tripled my network in the past year just because I'm doing online events, participating as well as a participant, because I need to experience how other people do it. That's kind of what I've been doing the last few years, months. And yeah, it's for me, it's the best thing ever happened. Although it's besides the COVID, the fact that we had to pivot to virtual, I think that's really a blessing. And in that sense, we'll never be fully virtual.
Yeah.
I don't think it will
Yeah.
ever go back to fully in person. It should be hybrid, somewhere in the in
This
between.
is this is almost a treasure trove of like case of why we should like embrace virtual. You gave like so many points. I was like keeping track of it, and then like I lost track. There was so many of those. Completely agree on all of them. And I felt like one point that you mentioned, which I think like struck me really well, is like hybrid is no more a single event. It's actually running two different events. It's kind of what it feels like when you're like the way that you're describing it is you got to run like a separate virtual event and then a separate in-person event, and they have like some sort of ways in which they're connecting, but you're kind of doing two different events. uh, Great points. I probably have to like rewatch this section of this video to capture all these great nuggets of information that you have over here. I'm going to jump into like the virtual event platforms itself, right? This is the as we know, there are now like hundreds, maybe even the thousands of like virtual platforms that have come up in the last 2 years, or like even from before, that are all over there. There are like the big players in the space, and then there are like sort of tiny things. We are a virtual event platform as well, so I know that like we are in red waters, as you mentioned there. So what would you say is like currently like lacking in these virtual event platforms, or where is the big opportunity, or what is the biggest need?
It's funny because how you put it like this, we had a brief conversation before this episode started, and I had like the fixed answers to it. But if you put it like that, I think what is missing for virtual events, I think is mainly something we overdo. Like, there are way too much features. Like, for
Mm,
the average event professional, they're gonna use or really make the most out of 10 features out of the 150 or 200 features that a platform offers. And sometimes less is just more, because you have to really focus on a specific goal, achieving your event goal. And mainly what you're doing with adding a billion features on top of it, obviously every event needs different features. So I'm not saying the platform shouldn't have all those features, but in terms of translating it to event professionals, maybe they should just, for each specific case, highlight a few of the features that actually match their event goals the best, because that's what the event professional wants. They want to design an event that fully kind of is the foundation of executing their event goals and making sure a certain effect happens, whether it's return on investment or it's engagement or networking or exchanging knowledge. You want to do that to the best of your capability. And then being overwhelmed with all these features, I think it really makes a lot of sense to just kind of customize it, which in that sense comes back to the points that we actually mentioned before we started, is really the customization of a platform. And that's
Mm,
obviously there's a lot possible there, but it's not just about the features, it's also about the experience for instance, a virtual attendee. As I mentioned in the beginning, where we spoke a bit about the webinar kind of on steroids, it shouldn't feel like you're back into that same standard, because obviously we experience something new, and especially our new generation, we quickly adapt, and then that becomes our standard. So if you want to keep improving, keep being new, innovative, and make sure that you actually capture people's attention, you have to always find a new way to do it. And the best way to do it is to customize it. And can be in terms of features, but it can definitely also be in terms of the look and feel of a platform. Maybe you
right.
want to, this time you want to make your attendees feel a different emotion. Then you have to be able to adjust the colors, to adjust kind of the user experience within your event. Because if you're a really professional event professional, everything is done on purpose. Everything is done like because A and B follow each other. That's only because it has a purpose and it is really made in that way. In terms of how a program item follows up, or how you as an attendee go from the lobby to the actual um, experience itself, like all these small details, a event professional would love to kind of tailor make every small part of the event, because they really are into the details. Devil's in the details, and event professionals deal with them all the time. If they can really customize the platform to match the event goals that I mentioned before the best, that's what really can help event platforms in general. Another thing that we quickly mentioned, which I think is especially important now and in the near future, is the data that we can collect on
Right.
our events, because that's one of the things that in person is very difficult. How can I collect data in terms to tell myself, like, okay, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, this is what I should improve, this is where I should focus on, this was what people didn't like the most. And obviously you can send a survey, that's great,
Right.
but what people say and what people do are two completely different things. And if you can actually track what people did during your event, preferably as deep in depth as possible in terms of the data that you can collect. Like in the best case scenario, you can even track someone's eyes via their webcam. Be careful for the privacy there, but obviously, like, really know when their attention drifted away and when they started doing emails, like I mentioned before, or when they were completely immersed in the experience, and what made that actually happen with that attendee, and how can you make sure that the next event has even more of those, or if you want people to relax, less of those, obviously, depending on what your goal is, what your audience is. And data is in that sense really something that can set you apart. And right now, it's a lot of event professionals that kind of struggle with what data is even available and how can I translate that back to my event goals, and
Right.
where I should improve on. And also for platforms, most of them can actually track everything, but then only showcase or kind of visualize 10% of them, which are still important ones, but are they the most important ones for that particular event professional? And they also don't help you translate whatever that data says to what actions should I need to take as an event professional. And I think those two things combined with the ease of use of a platform, it's cool to have a customization and that everything is completely aligned with your attendees. But if the user experience is not there, it's not obvious for them. Oh, the session is starting, I have to go here. Oh, I want to get in touch with people, I have to go there. If that's a hassle, or there are a lot of things that make it difficult for you to actually engage with the platform, probably within 5 minutes they'll be like, okay, I'll just watch the video, but I'm not even
Right.
going to interact with the platform because it's not intuitive for me. And I think those three main things, or four main things actually, including the feature one, would be really like the biggest need in virtual event platforms to improve upon.
Super valid. To just summarize there, I think you mentioned the ability to personalize or like make it customizable for every event professional to be able to get their brand, their story out there. That's actually a very good point. And then do it in a way so that it's not overwhelming to the participant, overwhelming to the event organizer. The ease of use, the usability of the platform itself is another great point. And then the one about data, not just raw data, but taking the data into insights and then the insights into actionable insights. That's kind of where the events platform should, there. Very, very valid points. I think these are like super critical. I feel like this is worthy of a call out in itself, right? Like these three things that like events platform should think about. We're almost towards the end. I'm going to jump into like this one last question that I have for you is this idea that I just got two invites this morning for a webinar style event. It literally both said like register here to attend the event, but even if you are not going to attend, we will send you the video for this. And it almost seems like that's become, and these are two events that literally said like it's okay if you don't attend the event. It's kind of like very confusing if you really think about it. Like these are not events anymore. These are glorified content producing channels at this point of time. And I'm particularly interested in this because that's the angle that I feel like as at Zinc we are like exploring is that how can we use events as a way to like sort of propel your content calendar and like create content out of it. At this point of time, events happen, and then like all the things that come out of it goes into like the another department, which is the content marketing team, which now then takes it and finds ways to do it. But if you put like a content hat right from when you're like producing the event to creating the event, it has like a whole new experience. And that's kind of where I'm exploring. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's one of the best way to also. I saw another session with I think Florian Kuhne, also great guy in the event industry, and he was mentioning this. It was about bridging the value gap, and then he meant like you have this event that's once in a year. You have an event, and then maybe 2 months before you start your communications, and then a month before you ramp it up, and then the day before, especially with virtual, you have all your tickets come in, and then people come or don't come, and kind of your communication slowly. Maybe 2 days after, you're like, "Thank you all for being here, and see you next year." And then next year, you have to start up that whole process again. And this is something where, if you make the right use and before preferably already strategize on how can we make the most of whatever we're having on this event, it's content, maybe it's just people chatting, like it you can reuse content in so many different ways. A lot of event professionals are really good at making the most out of their on demand content. And I think that really can bridge that gap, because then you can give them the whole year long, you're providing value. Maybe they missed one of the sessions, and instead of offering everything at once, you can kind of drip feed that throughout your content calendar, throughout the journey of your attendees, to make sure they're hyped for the new event, and then slowly transition to the communication about the new event. And then all year long, you're more or less engaging them. This is also where a few platforms are thinking about more of a community situation, where on the
Right.
one hand, people are like, yeah, but I don't want to feel kind of forced to be part of this, because maybe I only want to watch that one video, and then I feel like I'm not adding to this community, which, in some ways it works, in some ways it doesn't. It really has to
Right.
be a place where people can add value to each other. But in general speaking, with or without a community, the providing value along the whole year around is something that can be very powerful, because if one thing, we're dealing with a lot of short attention spans, you have to stay top of mind at all the time, or at least enough time so that next time they are already waiting for you to announce, oh, the next event is going to be launched. And this is where you can really add a lot of value with on-demand content. um, I must say, you also see a few event professionals that are like, yeah, but I'm no longer doing this because I only want to show people show up during the actual
Right.
event. And then they're literally like, there's no, they're in their marketing, they're like, there's no gonna be no recordings available. You really have to be here. And it's the only time you're gonna actually see the content. I haven't really seen numbers in terms of how much that differs in terms of the actual turn up rate, because for me most of the time what brings me to an event instead of looking only or only watching the on demand part of it is the fact that I can ask questions to a speaker that I wanted to ask questions to a long time ago, that I can
Right.
be part of this, like maybe in chat, see what other people are thinking, network, maybe perhaps depends on what kind of event it is. And in that sense, I always like to, especially when it's an a subject that I like or I'm interested in, I like to be there if it suits my agenda, because we cannot always do it. And in that case, I'm so grateful for on-demand content, because there were a lot of events that, I'm in Europe, you are on the other side of the pond, and maybe you at the end of the day are organizing an event that I really want to attend, but that is in the middle of the night for me. And I love your event then, but I also love my life and I love my sleep. I need to, wake up the next day. Then I can still kind of participate or be part of that event, even though I couldn't really attend in person. And I think that really adds a lot of value, despite for the company being able to bridge that gap and have content over the whole year, engage your audience and everyone in your funnel. But for me as an attendee, to actually be able to still consume all the knowledge, all the insights that are very valuable, because there is a lot of interesting, great content out there, to still consume that, even though I couldn't be there. So I think there is a huge value there, not per se in the community setting, but really in feeding value or dripping value over the whole customer journey. Especially if you only organize one event in a year, you have to make sure to keep people engaged all the time. And what better way to do that through the content that actually brings people to your event in the first place? And then it does make a lot of sense to, from the start, or probably even from beginning, like before you even start planning the event, to think like with that content head, as you mentioned, how can we make the most out of everything we're doing? Are we going to
Yep.
monitor the chat because maybe people are, exchanging valuable insights about a topic that is going on in the session, but it's not being recorded in that sense?
Right.
But your team can still record it. They can still extract it from the platform, look back, or just be present in the chat during the session, which I would definitely recommend the last one. And I kind of take so many snippets, the sessions, the takeaways in general. You can cut that up
Yeah.
into many different pieces. You obviously have the whole thing in once, but you can really, yeah, be as creative as possible with everything that's going on your event. um, just send people a direct message if you have, for instance, the possibility to connect with them, and ask them a question, and combine all those questions and turn it into an article. Like, sky is the
Yeah.
limit. Like, you can really make the most out of your events. And I was actually talking with the content strategist that's helping us, and she's like, if you cannot make a year of content from one event, you're doing it wrong. And
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
Yeah, I think this is very valuable. Like the way that you mentioned about like the entire audience journey, like content can be blended with event, and like you gotta like think about it from that perspective. And like it's almost like you can even reduce these cycles. Like you think about like running one big conference every year, and then like trying to drive content for that for the whole year. But you can like run every 2 months a sort of a thing, because like virtual lets you do that. And so you've produced enough content so that it cannot be like this 2 day event or like a 1 day conference, but like a small 2 hour meeting which really produces content for 2 months, and it feeds you and promotes your next event, and then it goes on as a cycle, and you start thinking about it like that. It becomes like a never ending machine of like lead generation, audience building, and like everything as well. So uh great points over there. I definitely want to like double down and like talk with you more about this after this show or later as well. But thanks so much. Thanks again for like coming in the show. I want to say that like you bring your own unique insights to this, and I felt like we learned a lot, and I think our audience will also learn a lot from this. Thanks, Merijn, again.
Thank you so much for the possibility to be here. I love talking about virtual, hybrid, in-person events, like everything event related. So really appreciate that you invited me. You're a great host. Love your questions, and I hope that your audience got the value out of it that you also saw today.
Thank you so much, Merijn. Have a good one.